Everywhere we turn, we see division. Everywhere we go, we feel alone. How do we live in a time that is so polarizing and isolating? How do we find meaning in a world filled with so much noise? Where is the understanding and empathy? Where is the freedom from our pain? Join me, Russell Eugene Welch III. This is our journey together as we discover that the answers to life's biggest questions and hardest choices are not some deep, mystical secret locked away in some far-off corner of the universe, but the soft, gentle voice in our own hearts. This is our first step, as together we embark on our incredible adventure of empathy, unity, and understanding. These are the stories of human triumph. Your stories, our stories. This is the struggle for meaning. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Struggle for Meaning podcast. I am your host, Russell Eugene Welch III, and today in the studio we have with us our one-woman production team, getting all of the stuff done that I couldn't possibly do, multitasking like a beast, and carrying the weight of, well, dealing with a pain in the ass like me on her shoulders. Please welcome Paige Bell.
My name is Paige. I have been friends with Russell 9 years, going on almost a decade. So I've gotten to know him pretty well. So I was thrilled when he asked me to help him on this podcast, as well as to be the person to occasionally join him and help you guys get to know him. You guys will like him, trust me, he's a great guy. Russell is a creative genius in my mind, has been looking for an outlet for years to be able to talk to people intellectually and to be able to
No, I've just been looking.
Get
You should
some
just stop
ideas.
it. I've been looking for an outlet to talk to people. I've just been struggling to just like have a conversation at all.
Yeah, people don't like him, which is accurate. Yeah, Russell over here is a creative genius, been looking for an outlet, but he needs some people around to talk to. So the point of this
Make me
podcast...
sound sad and depressed.
No, that's me.
Right, yeah, quit projecting. Paige.
But see, I don't want to talk to people. I don't have this desire. This isn't a problem I struggle with. As you're going to be talking to many people throughout this podcast, I know for a fact that you're going to be talking to people about philosophy and worldviews and things. Why don't you tell us what's your life philosophy and your worldview?
Good ethics are the foundation of any functioning, successful society. Ethics are not subjective, they are objective. They do not come from authority, because an appeal to an authority. If you have an appeal to authority, you can't hold the authority figure responsible. God, a king, even a world philosophy, that's where we go wrong. People look at World War II. People look at World War II and they say, where did we go wrong? How did we get there? How do we get to these places? Like, how do we go so far? The reason why problems like this occur is not a result of any specific worldview. Take any worldview, and it becomes a problem on the extreme end. The reason why something can go off the rails and become a problem isn't because necessarily the core components of it are wrong. Look at capitalism. Capitalism is great, does a lot of good things for a lot of people, but completely unrestrained capitalism turns into mass exploitation of the many by the few. Like, it's just ripe for abuse. But if you look at socialism, there's social programs that we all agree are great and wonderful, like the police or firefighters or the roads, social security. We like social systems. But look at socialism in extreme form. You take anything and you ramp it up to 10 and it goes wrong. But where does it go wrong? How do you define when something's going wrong? So it goes wrong when it ceases to serve an ethical standard that benefits society, because you compromise the rights of individuals for the collective. that always results in more problems. There's no, I'll sacrifice the few for the many. You open the door for everyone's rights to be sacrificed and compromised. And it's just a slippery slope that you can't come back from. You need to make a sharp turn 180 and go the other way. You can't compromise the rights of the few for the many. And the second part of that is people make those mistakes. They compromise the few for the many. They compromise standards, ethical standards that shouldn't be compromised in justification of some worldview or belief, whether that's a religion, a philosophy, a political philosophy, the pursuit of a goal, a corporation's bottom line. This problem comes when you put that first. You put that before your ethical standard. Any philosophy reaches the point of no return where it becomes absolutely corruptible, and then you get the horrific responses, this horrific instances that we saw from like communism, socialism, gulag, concentration camps. Like history before that is littered with examples of religious ideologies taking things too far, with massacres and tortures and inquisitions and all of these philosophies. It's not that the philosophy in and of itself, the worldview in and of itself, was wrong to begin with. Really, everything tends to be more of a mixed bag. Right, left, any ideology, it's right about some things, it's wrong about other things. The problem arises when you view something, a certain standard, as being perfect and you can't compromise any of it. Because what happens is that's an appeal to the authority of the structure, and when you can't question the structure, it can't be held accountable. That's why I think ethics are based on society through the evolved traits of empathy and reciprocity. That's important because if you compromise those things for any ideology, if you put any ideology as being above question, it will always create problems, because then you can't police any of the members who are imposing the will of that ideology. And that's how horrors take place. That's where any and every position, social, political, philosophical, religious, theological, metaphysical, spiritual, all will always go wrong, is when you take that standard and you become unwilling and unable to question it and hold it responsible, because then you can't question, hold responsible the people who act in its name, and then atrocities take place. When people view their worldview as above approach, then they are willing to kill other people and sacrifice their rights for its goal, because it's for the greater good. And then they sacrifice the few for the many. It's an erroneous miscalculation, because when you create a world in which some people's rights can be suspended for the many, or even for other few, you're creating a world in which anyone's rights can be suspended. And when anyone's rights can be suspended, no one truly has rights except the people who have power. And then those people will use their power to the utmost.
Second question is a personal question. What's the greatest growth that you have made in your life, and something that currently is a great, to phrase it nicely, learning opportunity that you need to take and that you're aware of that you...
Something I need to work on is communicating in a way that includes how people feel. Because I have a tendency to see the world in not like a binary black and white sense. I'm aware of the fact that the world has a lot of spectrums of gray and a lot of nuance, and it's very important to take those things into account. But I have a tendency to look at the bare facts, to look at the raw data, and then just state what the raw data states. And there's a lot of people who are like that out there, who are like, well, facts don't care about your feelings. True, but people care about their feelings. And if you want to communicate facts to people, you need to account for their feelings. Otherwise, they won't hear you. Because here's a fact for you. It's a fact that if you don't take people's feelings into account when you're communicating to them, they won't hear what you're communicating. And then here's another fact for you. You failed to communicate your point, and you probably made that person have a bad experience with that piece of information. So even if someone tries to tell them, or they encounter it in a benign way in the future, someone tries to tell them, in a nice, decent way, they're probably going to have an emotional response to that and reject that information. You just created an enemy to your fact by throwing it in their face. So it's extremely important to take people's feelings into account. And that's something that I've been working on, but just from the way in which I delivered that, you can tell I have some progress to be made in the future.
Before you answer the greatest growth, how are you working on that? Like, what's your process been like?
So my process is, first, when I'm talking to someone else, make a conscious effort to get a good idea of where they're coming from, which it'll depend on the circumstances. A lot of my guests in the first season are going to be people who I've known for years and talked to, so I already have had many of these conversations and I understand, so you won't get to see as many examples of that early on, but it's important too when you're having conversation with someone for the first time or with someone who's changed their opinion about something to ask them a lot of clarifying questions, though you'll get some examples of that. Clarifying questions of what it is they believe first. Don't assume that just because they're on the left or the right that they hold all the traditional ideologies or to any degree. It varies as the wind. People's opinions vary as the wind, and people's opinions change. Just because they were far on the right or on the left or in the center doesn't mean they are now. And just because they hold one opinion doesn't mean they hold another opinion. And they may not hold it as severely as you do. It's important that you understand what someone believes. And also, it's important that you understand why they believe it first. Because otherwise, you're just arguing with the voices in your head and throwing words out at them that they're going to reject. They're not going to listen to what you're saying. And you're not listening to what they're saying. You don't understand them. You're not communicating to them. You're just having a conversation with yourself in your head so you can feel good about yourself for sharing your opinion. But like I said earlier, for the same as for if you're telling someone facts, or even if you're not telling someone facts, or even if you're just telling them their feelings, if someone else doesn't feel heard and understood to some capacity to you because you couldn't ask them questions about what they believed and then articulate back to them in a way that they say yes, because that's important. If you can articulate what someone else is saying back to them in a way in which they say yes, then you know that you understood. That doesn't mean you have to agree with what they're saying, but if you say, this is what you're saying, and they say, yes, that's what I'm saying, you understood. If they don't say yes, you haven't understood. You need to ask more questions. You need to set aside your personal bias or your perspective, even if you think they're blatantly wrong. You can't have a conversation with someone and change their mind that's meaningful unless you understand where they're coming from.
So I hear that this involves a lot of active listening.
This involves a lot of active listening. It takes some patience. But after you establish that, then you can get to the point where you can start to have a conversation, and you approach the conversation from there by, instead of making descriptive statements and trying to ram your belief down their throat, what you want to do is you want to ask them questions to get them to think about the things they haven't thought of before, or to call attention to the things that they should be paying attention to that they haven't, without accusing them. Instead of saying, you didn't look that article up, did you? You ask them, did you check the sources of that article? What sources does that article have? That gives them the opportunity, without being trapped in feeling attacked, to think about the fact. If you make someone feel attacked, they won't think at all. They'll just impulsively respond. And for anyone who's like, well, it shouldn't matter, for anyone who responds, well, it shouldn't matter because that's the truth. Here's the thing. You responding like that is an emotional response. You don't like the fact that people won't just accept what you're saying because you view it as true. And so you have an emotional response that reflexively responds to that and pushes against it. And you're not willing to hear that. And if you're not willing to hear that, that should demonstrate to you that this same rule applies to you. And they're not different from you. They're like you. People like to think people are different from them, and then they attack their perceived differences. But in that way, you're not different. You're the same. You care about how people say things to you. You don't like to be insulted. Extend someone else the courtesy, and you'll have a productive conversation. And if they don't have a productive conversation, then you can walk away toting your head high, patting yourself on the back, telling yourself that it wasn't you.
So then what's your greatest growth that you've made?
One way in which I grew, I wouldn't say it was necessarily the most difficult thing I've worked through in my life. That's really hard to quantify because many things are difficult in different kinds of ways. But
Sure.
one thing that I'll just highlight for this is the fact that I was born with extreme dyslexia, like really extreme dyslexia. I failed grades many, many times. I was held back a bunch of times, like more than you can count on one hand. It was a lot. I was really far behind. Some of the people who tested me, like I had a lot of like specialized tests. My parents were trying to get me help and trying to give me special programs to like get taught. And I worked really hard and they were there, which helped. But yeah, I had a severe learning disability and I was held back for many years. And I was told sometimes by some of the people who tested me that I would never be able to graduate high school. But I ended up catching up. I graduated 1 year late and then went on to go to some college. And then here I am now, acting like I know shit. I've also written a book since then. I've written a lot of philosophy, poetry, blurbs, nonsense. I was always passionate about storytelling and the barrier of not being able to read and write. And then since then, still I can't spell for crap. Like, I'm how bad is my spelling page?
Very.
Is it as bad as it was, though?
No.
Okay. It was deplorable. Absolutely deplorable. That was a big thing that it took years of discipline and practice and dedication to do something that I was told that I had a mental disability that I probably wouldn't be able to overcome and that I couldn't do anything about. But I was like, nah, watch me. I can do this. That doesn't mean everybody who has a different experience than me or a similar condition can have the same experience, because nobody's the same. And don't compare your experience to mine, and don't feel bad if you can't emulate that or whatever, or if you don't have to struggle with. There's no you're not good enough or you're not good because someone else accomplished something. Other people's accomplishments don't diminish your accomplishments or your struggles. Like, gauge yourself against yourself, not against me or anyone else.
The next question is the best and the worst phase in your life.
I don't think of my life in terms of best or worst. I don't look back on my life and think, oh, like that time sucked and like I regret that or that was. Here's the thing. I've been through a lot. Everyone's been through a lot. We all have unique experiences. We all have our own struggles. Some people have more to deal with than others, and that's not really like equatable. Everyone's experience is unique. But as far as like all the things I've been through, all the things that I've had to work through, sure, I've experienced a lot. I've been the victim of violent, horrendous crimes. I've had to deal with a lot of issues. I've had to deal with loss and death and persecution, and I've had a lot great in my life. I've had a very supportive family that's been there for me, even though I can most often am a pain in the ass and an asshole. I've had a lot of brilliant opportunities and experiences, being able to travel a lot around the world and participate in a lot of community programs, a lot of national programs, a lot of charity work here and overseas. I've gotten to see a lot of people's lives change and turn around. I've had the opportunity to learn so much. I've been given by biology. Life handed me a pretty good card. I have some mental disabilities that I was born with. I have some personal struggles. I have some physical deficiencies and deformities, but everybody has something. And I don't really look back on my life and think, oh, there was a bad time. There was times that were rough. There were times that were difficult. There were times that were really hard to work through. But I'm extremely grateful for them because they deepened my perception of the good times. They enriched all of my experiences and I learned from them. And as far as the good times, the good time in my life is right now. Wherever I'm at, it's right now, because I'm where I am because I chose to be here. I wanted to be here. I took control of my life. I took charge of my life. I put my foot in front of the other, even when I felt helpless. When life didn't hand me the options I wanted or the opportunities I wanted, I got up off my ass and I created them. And some of those, it took years and years of discipline to become someone who could control my creative process, control my creativity, and influence myself to think outside the box to solve those problems. But even if I didn't have an answer for that right away or a way, like some of the things that I'm working on, some of the places that I am now, it took me more than a decade to solve that problem, to think of a solution, to creatively find a way around it or through it, or work to control, work to understand myself and overcome my difficulties and become someone who could deal with the parts of myself that I didn't want to or that were difficult. The good time is all the time. It's right now. It's every moment that I'm alive that I get to live and breathe and experience new things and learn and grow. Now, I'm not saying that horrible things that happen are good things. Like, horrible things have happened to me, and those horrible things weren't good things. But I chose to make those horrible things good for me and to be a better, stronger person for them, instead of letting them define me and diminish me. I grew from them, because nothing in life is a waste unless you waste your opportunity to learn from it.
What's one thing that bothers you most about our world?
Bothers me? Well, here's the thing. We're going to have to define more specifically, like, bothers me. Do you mean, are there things in the world that upset me? Sure, there's lots of things in the world that upset me. There's a lot of bad things that happen. Sort of horrible things that happen. There's a lot that goes wrong. There's a lot of tragedies that take place. Do I not expect tragedy to take place? Do I not expect there to be suffering in the world? Do I not expect to often fail time and time again and have to deal with that? No, it's a part of life. It's a spectrum of life. And if you deny or run from the bad parts of life, you're running from half of all life's experiences. The fact is you can't live a one-sided life where things are all just good all the time. You live whether you want to or not. And if you're trying not to, you're living in denial. And that's why part of why life is such a struggle and persecutes you so much, is because it's constantly punishingly grinding you into the ground, reminding you that life can be cruel and harsh and uncompromising. And if you're not acceptant of that fact, if you don't embrace that fact, then it will grind you to powder. But if you embrace that fact, if you embrace the fact that there is suffering in life, and that's okay. Suffering isn't good, but good can come from it if you can choose to embrace it. Sadness gives happiness context. Grief gives joy meaning. And maybe a reality in which none of us suffer would be nice, but that's not the reality we live in. We live in this reality, and we need to figure out the best way to deal with the reality we live in, this one, the one that is cruel and harsh, the one where we do suffer. And in that world, I don't see any benefit to denying and trying to live in denial and not accept the fact that it is tough. It's really hard, and there's a lot that sucks. And I think that's why so many people turn to addictive substances or addictive behaviors or denial or depression. Now, there's many other reasons, but I think that's a big part of it, is because we don't want to accept that life is harsh and that life is tough. We don't want to accept the other side of the coin of life. People say there's two sides to every coin, but there's three sides to every coin. There's the middle, and the middle connects the two. And you can't just live a life of one extreme or the other extreme and deny it. There's a connection in the middle. There's the good and there's the bad, and it's both of your life. And if you think of life as just a two-sided coin, you're just flipping that coin over and you're like, oh, it's on the good side, I can enjoy my life. Oh, now it's on the bad side, my life sucks and it's horrible. But if you think of it in terms of what a coin really is, a coin isn't two-sided, it's three-sided, and there's that side in the middle that holds it together, and that's the important side. Then you think of it in terms of, yes, the sucky side is up right now, but the good side is there on the other side, and it's connected to the good side. And the part that sucks is connected to the good side, and I can learn and grow from it because it's connected. I can enrich and appreciate and be more grateful for the good times that I have when they come, and when I'm in the bad times, I can choose to learn and grow from it. And that doesn't mean you don't feel miserable and you don't be upset and you don't get angry. It's okay to be human, and it's okay to feel these emotions. There's nothing wrong with the way you feel. And there's nothing wrong with you for feeling the way you feel. All your feelings are valid and legitimate. But where we go wrong is when we let how we feel determine our actions and control us instead of staying in control of our life. You can accept the way you feel and embrace the way you feel and be okay with it, and still make a different choice. make the right choice, make the choice to learn and grow.
This is something important because you will be talking to people about current events, ideologies, a bunch of different intellectual topics. And obviously, when you get into academia, you have to be able to do research and things. So just for the people out there, just so they understand a little bit, where do you tend to get your info, your news? How do you find facts? How do you educate yourself?
I just make it up.
Good.
I don't believe that any source is truly without bias. I think everyone has their bias, but I think that there's a spectrum of bias and that some places are more biased than others. And you can evaluate that, but you have to step outside of your initial desire to want something to be true first and be willing to accept the world for what it is, even if it's the opposite of what you want to be true. And that's a really, really, really hard thing to do, and it takes an immense amount of personal growth and self-reflection. But as far as where I get my information from, what I like to do is I like to evaluate both sides, both extreme sides of a main discourse, try to evaluate some information in the middle, and then look where they're getting that information from. Can I dig behind what they're saying about it and look at just what are the empirical facts of what's happening? So you watch a YouTube video where it's like, angry man confronts sweet woman. And that immediately, just that caption is going to color heavily your interpretation of what's going to happen. But if you can set that aside and ask yourself, is this a fair representation? This is probably their personal perception. What's actually going on here? Then you can view that differently. And a lot of times when it comes to news cycles and stuff like that, you can dig into the circumstance and you can read, well, this is the raw data of what happened. These are the facts. This is what he said. This is what they were doing. And then try to draw a reasonable conclusion. Now, many times you're not an expert and you just have to find a qualified professional or a consensus of qualified professionals. So for a lot of things, it comes down to what's the consensus of the qualified professionals. And it's okay to just not know everything. I would never be comfortable naming a single news source that I'm familiar with, whether it's mainstream media or like a YouTuber who posts news or articles or anything like that, that I would consider to be a truly reliable, unbiased source. There are many places that are reliable sources, and there are some places that are kind of unbiased, but kind of unreliable. Like it's a mixed bag, but it tends to be my overwhelming experience that places have their own bias, and you need to take that into account and draw your own conclusions and think for yourself. I will always check, especially if I even get the slightest kind of inkling that someone has a colored bias or an agenda or is trying to represent one side more than the other, or is coming more from the right or the left. I'll immediately try to pull up the opposition, and then I'll evaluate that, and I'll alternate between the two, and then I'll watch that, and then I'll go and try to I'll look at it and I'll be like, what are they referencing? What happened? What can I find out about what really happened, and not just their opinion or their perception of what they're telling me what happened? Sometimes you can't. And sometimes I have to accept the fact that I don't have enough real information to meaningfully draw a real conclusion and have an opinion. Sometimes I have to say, you know what? I don't have access to the right information where I'm comfortable making a judgment. I'm not qualified to make a judgment. Hands off. I'm just keep my mouth shut on this topic. You don't have to have an opinion and be right about everything. It's better if you stick to your expertise, if you have one. Too much of the world is filled with so many people who are so brilliant and so talented, but are willing to talk about many areas in which they're just not qualified.
What's something you find deeply unsettling? It could be a thought, an idea, a current event.
Something that I find deeply unsettling is our failure to use properly the tools that we have at our disposal to radically improve the direction and the velocity and the momentum by which society improves. That comes mostly in the form of our current problem with education, our catastrophic failure in education. If we're being honest, if we're being reasonable, we have to accept the fact that most people are unreasonable. Most people don't like to deal with reality. Most people are bad at dealing with reality. And when I said those things, everybody knew a bunch of people who immediately came to mind. And here's the thing. You're probably one of those people, and that's hard to hear, because the fact is when you hear about how somebody else could be wrong, and your reaction is to judge someone else, that means you're not evaluating yourself. And if you're not evaluating yourself, that means you're not improving. So that kind of makes you a hypocrite. No, it doesn't kind of make you, it does make you a hypocrite. But here's the thing. Everybody is. Well, not everybody universally, but the overwhelming majority of people are. And so that doesn't make you like a horrible person. That makes you normal. It makes you normal. It's part of the human experience, and it's what we do. But we know that people have confirmation bias. We know that people overwhelmingly prefer information that validates them. We know people are bad at evaluating the other side's position. We know that we prefer to cherry pick data. We know that we tend to just Google what we want that confirms our bias, look on the first page of Google, read one article or a few, and just double down on our belief. We know that people think this way, but we haven't made a conscious effort to incorporate curriculum that would combat these things in our education system. We need a change. We need a radical change in the way in which we teach. We need an education system that doesn't prioritize regurgitating information and completely rethinks the way in which we standardize tests, but instead prioritizes demonstrating that people can learn something. So instead of you having a test where you have to study a bunch of things and then spit out this information, you have a test where you go in, they present you with information, and you have to do a good job finding quality sources, differentiating between them, and then breaking it down, and then making a good argument that's reasonable and that's logical. Now, that doesn't replace, say, for example, like math and stuff. Like we have fundamental things like that, but I also think we need just things in the education system that teach things like CPR and how to budget and recognize logical fallacies. All of these things can change so much in culture and society. Like they're not going to cure people of these things, but it'll make a huge difference. And that's one of the things that upsets me in society, is that we have failed when we know how these things work to take decisive, meaningful steps to actually combat these things. We have failed to upgrade our education system, and it's failing all of us. A lot of these struggles that you have are because the education system failed you. It didn't do its job to teach you the things that it could have and should have. It taught you a bunch of useless information that stifled your creativity and passion. Now, it taught you good information too, but that doesn't justify the way in which it failed you, and that doesn't change how desperately we need to rethink and radically change and update our education system.
Just to put something in, if you don't mind, if I interject from time to time. I completely agree with you for the fact of, I don't think that there's anything in our education system necessarily that needs to be fully removed. It's not like, I think we shouldn't teach math, or we shouldn't teach history, or shouldn't teach language and science and all the different things that we do teach now, that the testing should be different. And we should add a bunch of stuff. We should also minimize some of that, because there's a lot of that stuff where kids are 100% right when they ask, when am I ever going to need this?
Well, we live in a world now where you don't need to be able to regurgitate information, because literally everyone, even now, a lot of people in third world countries are now have access to smartphones and the internet. It's not important that you know what happened in 1742 on June 2nd.
If anything, it's more important that because there's so much massive information that you can tell what's right and what's wrong.
Absolutely. That is what's important. And that's why I listed the type of testing that you would have, is it would evaluate on your sources and your information, how you learn. Did you do your due process? Are you viewing it objectively?
I also think another failing of the education system is to teach in one way when people learn in so many different ways, but they just like lecture style.
I think also the undergraduate system should have a lot more like the college system, where you can choose courses.
Yeah.
I think you should have options to choose courses.
I think you mean high school, though, because undergrad is college.
My bad. Yeah, I think high school you should be able to choose courses.
I agree with you. I think all of these things are great things, and I don't think that people tend to brush over the education system because in their minds, these other things are so much worse.
They're not. But the education system is ruining our country. The catastrophic effect it has on the psychology. Kids are miserable. They hate going to school. That should tell you something. It's a fucked up system. It's corrupt. It's doing a shit job. It's ruining their desire to learn and stifling their creativity. It is a literal fucking crime.
It's breaking them so that they fit into the mold that society wants them.
But they're not fitting into a mold. They don't.
No.
It's just breaking them and leaving them and telling them they need to fit into the mold. Yeah. And then when they don't, they feel like they're a failure.
Yeah, the education system tries, and if they are flexible enough or moldable, then society's like, great, you're a success, you passed. But if it just breaks you, then it's like, oh, well, sucks, you're dumb.
And it has some justification. I get where it's coming from. It's like, you should learn these things. These are the important things to know. Sure, but you're not dealing with a reality anymore. The fact is when people didn't even have like a local library, or they did, and they had almost no information in it, it was important that people understood things. It was important that people know things. But nowadays, it's not important that you can regurgitate specific facts, because people are learning stuff constantly. They're constantly looking things up. If they ever want to know anything, they can ask their smartphone. They can get on the internet.
I mean, take this as a personal example. Earlier today, mind you, I graduated with a actuarial science and accounting degree. So I'm basically a stats and math major. I asked my phone earlier today to do basic multiplication for me. Now, is that because I couldn't do it? No. But if it's so easy and it's right there, even I know how to do it and I learned it, I just don't need to, and I'm not going to spend my time like that. However, it would be great if people truly could evaluate information honestly and we didn't have such a massive spread of misinformation.
Yeah, we need to teach. We need classes on logic. We need classes that teach us about cognitive biases, that teach us about human behavior. And we need to allow students to have their smartphones during tests. Because here's the thing, you're not preparing them for life. If they're taking a test and they can't use their smartphone, everything you're testing them on, is fucking useless, because they have their cell phones in life. They have that in life. If you want to prepare them for life, figure out a way to intelligently test them that includes their access to smartphones, because this is the world we live in.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I would definitely add to high school and middle school would be definitely some psychology classes.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot of things that would help, and people would be able to grow and understand better if they understood the human psyche.
I think we need a class on empathy.
That'd be fantastic. I think there should be one about basic human boundaries and ethical responsibilities.
Right, you'd have a whole list of courses over time where you'd have classes on empathy, you'd have classes on like diversity, you'd have classes on understanding people, understanding psychology, understanding yourself.
I 100% agree with you. And that's why I like college, because it's not like college has its shit together. College still has a lot of issues, but it's a lot more open to these ideas, and these options are
right, but they took the first step and then they stopped there. We're talking about taking 10 more steps, and they took one step. They're closer, but
college isn't there. But I'm saying that's
all of this stuff that we're talking about incorporating, updating high school, colleges need to get wind and get on board too.
100%. But that's why I'm saying on a personal level, that's why I enjoyed college infinitely more than high school, is because it gets closer to that than I experienced in high school.
Right.
It's much more fun in college. College is fantastic. Even with the deficiencies it has, it's so much better. So, now that we've spent a lot of time on that question, but I think it was valid. Why choose to do this podcast? What's your purpose?
I haven't figured everything out. I've reached a point now where it's harder and harder for me to find people who can meaningfully challenge me on my world philosophy that are around me. And that's not because I haven't surrounded myself with tons of really intelligent people. It's because I have surrounded myself with really intelligent and some people who are very wise as well. And in any of the ways in which I'm going to have a meaningful, productive conversation, and I've been down that road many times. I only have access to so many people around me. So it's partially selfish, because I put my opinion out there. That opens up the spectrum for way more of the world to jump in on the conversation and tell me things that I didn't know, to change my mind, to change what I think. This provides me the opportunity. Then I make a fool out of myself in public because I was wrong, and then I have to come out and be like, guys, like, I was wrong. Here's what's right. But I'm open to doing that. I am completely unashamed and perfectly willing to be publicly wrong and make a fool out of myself. I get the opportunity to then be right and learn the truth. Now, obviously, that's never the goal. I'm going to put in back-breaking work and then some to not end up in that place. I also think that I have a lot of constructive thoughts and meaningful things to share with other people. I've also done a lot of work and a lot of research, and I try very hard to have an understanding and a perception of where people are coming from, and then form an opinion that's outside of the general consensus or the general conversation or people's biases. Now, I'm still subject to my own bias, and I'm still subject to other people's bias, and I'm still subject to being influenced by certain people who I respect. But I try to take all of those things into account and adjust for them when I'm learning things. I by no means think that I have it all figured out. And even if I state something like it's an absolute fact, that doesn't mean I'm right. I've probably said something already where something I've said that you've thought about and you've been like, I don't know about that. Or maybe you think I'm blatantly wrong. I'd love to hear your reason. Can you tell me? Can you demonstrate that? Is that just an opinion you think? The more people that are willing to have real conversations, the more people that are willing to engage with both sides and have a productive dialogue, the better it makes society. And I want to be part of that conversation. Now, part of that's because, I want to feel special and I want to get recognition for my hard work. Society benefits the more of us that actively engage. Silencing people is never the solution. If you're silencing an idea, no matter how radical, it's out of fear of the consequences of people hearing it. And the truth does not fear. The truth has the best motivation to question in an intellectually honest and an open-minded way. Because if you are truly questioning intellectually honest and open-minded way, then you will arrive at the truth unless you simply don't have access to the right information.
Good point.
So I want to be able to help people along that process, and I want people to help me along that process.
So that was a segment where we got to know Russell's ideologies and his thoughts about some of them.
We haven't even scratched the surface of the iceberg. We've just seen that there's an iceberg on the horizon.
Right, but we can't fully get into that in one intro episode.
You can never fully get into all of what someone thinks ever.
That's true.
Especially because if they're intelligently engaging with life, it's evolving.
Always.
Because you should be honing and improving your ideas. No one has a perfect and complete understanding and perception.
No.
So we all need to be actively working to improve. If I'm living life properly, I will look back in 10 years on what I said now and been like, oof, that's rough, buddy.
Don't worry. You get somewhere. You'll get better.
But I need to start somewhere.
What is your most cherished childhood/adolescent memory? I've
written a little short story about this that maybe I'll share at some point and publish. When I was about 6 years old, it was my birthday, as happens when you turn 6 years old. You have a birthday. And I was running around the house, and we had a bunch of little Hot Wheels cars, and I was playing with the Hot Wheels cars, and I was racing them. And as I was racing the Hot Wheels cars, up and down the hallway, I was listening to all the adults talking in the living room. And I was thinking really hard about, what are they saying? And I was making an effort to, just act like a normal, fucking kid playing around. But I was listening. I was like, what are they talking about? And I was listening to the way in which they talked about what was happening in the world, their feelings and how they felt about stuff. And I was thinking, it doesn't seem like they're really being honest with themselves about how they feel. It seems like, they're expressing things that they feel, but it seems like some of the things they're saying aren't even necessarily things that maybe are true for them. They're things that they're telling themselves are true. And a lot of things that they're talking about doesn't seem like they actually are informed on these topics. I wasn't using these big words to quantify these thoughts as a kid. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, but that seems pretty normal. It seems like everybody does that. And then I was asking myself, is this how I want to live my life? When I'm their age, do I want to be at that place? Do I want to look forward to a future in which I can't be honest with myself about how I feel and with other people, in which I talk about topics in which I'm not informed on, when I have opinions that are extremely biased and narrow-minded? Is this the future that I have in store? Is this my life? I told myself, I was like, no, that's not the future I want to have. That's not the life I want to have. Do I want for my future? How do I want to understand and relate to the world? I want to be able to face reality. I want answers for the big questions, and I don't think I can do that if I'm not honest with myself and if I don't deal with the difficult questions and don't deal with reality. And this was the beginning of my process that brought me here, is I asked myself, what will it take to get there? What do I need to start doing now? How do I need to start relating to the world to become the person who really, truly, objectively sees the world for what it is as best as I can? I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I've come a long way. Hopefully I've come a long way. I've spent my entire life since then, just, the past 20 years, every single day working on that. So if I haven't made some progress, then I've been wasting my fucking time.
List us some of your passions in life.
Storytelling, because storytelling is a wonderful, delightful way to communicate with people and convey emotions and share emotions and feelings. Art is beautiful. It does the same thing. It not necessarily in words, but it communicates feelings between people, and you can interpret it.
How do you do art?
I write philosophy. I write poetry. I write stories, fiction, science fiction. I'm just super passionate about being alive. Every single new day is exciting and different and weird and crazy, especially when I'm around. There's just so much to learn and so much to do and so much to know and so many amazing people and so many crazy people. And yeah, there's a lot of jerks too, but they have a story and they have a reason, and that doesn't justify their bad actions. But if you understand where they're coming from, then maybe you can do a little bit to help them understand that the world doesn't have to be such a dark, scary place. The thing that I really love is I love personal growth, the opportunity to learn and grow, and I love doing that through philosophy. And philosophy is my number one passion. It's my real, true love in life. And not philosophy in like the academic sense of like the class philosophy that you learn in college or like books you read on philosophy, but the concept of philosophy, the concept of asking questions and looking for the real answer, setting aside your personal bias and truly searching for truth. Truth is what it is, not what you want it to be, not what you need it to be, but overcoming and learning and asking yourself questions to find out what you want truth to be, what you need truth to be, what are your biases, so you can set those biases aside and really explore that question. Philosophy is my path to truth.
This one ties into that one. So what makes you, as a person, feel accomplished?
I mean, I feel a level of accomplishment when I complete a task that I worked hard on. Everyone should. It's good to work hard on things and accomplish things that are difficult. That's how we learn and grow, whether that's learning and growing, maturing as a person, reaching a greater understanding of something, changing your mind about something that you were being narrow-minded about, or just building a birdhouse as a kid, or just fucking splashing in puddles as an adult in the parking lot at Meijer, or just out there like making muddy puddle footprints in a puddle and splashing around and having a good time and making a little pattern and then feeling good about it. There's no reason you can't. Life is full of little joys and big joys, and all the big joys are accumulation of little joys, and you can enjoy them all. But what really gives me a true, deep, meaningful sense of accomplishment is when I have worked really, really, really hard to discipline myself, to learn something, to set aside my biases, to accept my feelings for what they are, even though they're difficult. And then I can share that information with someone else, and it makes a positive difference in their life. When I can do all that work and then share that value with someone else, it's so meaningful to be able to invest in something and work hard in something and have other people appreciate and enjoy it, and for it to make a positive difference on their life. And I think that's what so many of us just want from life, is to be able to share value with other people, and whether that value is in playing games and sharing that experience with them, or in art, or in science, or in a new discovery. And that's what really gives me the deepest sense of meaning, is being able to work really hard on something and reach an understanding that I can share with someone else that will benefit them constructively and make a difference. It'll make their life a little bit better, even if it just makes them a little bit happier for that day, because they hear me talking about being 26 years old and completely okay with making muddy puddle footprint patterns in the parking lot during the rain, and not worrying about the fact that people are judging me. Yeah, people around me are judging me all the time, but so what?
Who gives a fuck?
It's my life. It's mine. They'll go home and they'll maybe have a laugh about it. But what does that change? The only thing it changes is my experience for the worst if I let how they feel and think. And not even how they feel and think, but how I think they might feel or think. Control how I'm going to live my life and if I'm going to enjoy myself. Or if I'm going to skip down the aisles at like Rite Aid or some crap.
Because there's a good chance that they're looking at you in joy too.
Maybe. I think a lot of people too look at that and they judge you and they're upset and they're mad. But what's their real motivation? Why would they be upset and mad? Because they're angry that you're willing to express yourself in a way that they're unwilling to. They feel trapped. They feel like they can't let out their inner child. They can't embrace the small joys in life. And to me, I find that sad. And I don't judge that person for it and think that they're a bad person or they're a jerk. I think that they've just been dealt a hand in life where they feel like they don't have a choice and they can't express themselves and they can't be open. And so they're angry and they're hurt and they're confused and they don't know the answers to these things, but they tell themselves they do so that they can be okay with it and go through life. And so they have to judge you for doing these things. Because if they don't, then they would have to confront the fact that they're not happy and they're not being what they want to be and they're not being themselves. They're being something else. They're putting on a face for society.
I think that the biggest reason why I like you, and I could list 100 reasons why I like you. I would need 5 minutes and I could just sit here and ramble off a bunch of reasons why I like you.
Barf.
But I do think that the biggest, most serious one that I truly, truly appreciate is about you as a human that I wish other people had, because it would be great to have more people like you around, is the fact that you do share information and you push me to be a better human, and not in a way of, not in the judgmental way of like, you need to be better, like you disappoint me if you're not better, but in the realistic way of like, you can choose to do whatever you want, but I'm here, and if you want to be better and happier, maybe this will help, and I'll try and help. And if it doesn't, then I still wish you the best, and we tried. There's no judgment when you share something with me, and most of the things you share with me, you're right.
Well, I just don't share my judgment. That's the thing, is we all judge people all the time, constantly, but that doesn't mean you don't need to share your judgments most of the time.
You don't need to, but sometimes they're constructive,
but
so sometimes
I
you
do,
should.
because like, here's a judgment like of what you just said. I appreciate that you shared that. Thank you.
Anytime. I would say that you as a person have added far more value to my life than most of my other friends, just because you've shared and stood with me along the way and helped me grow and become a better person. And I can consistently grow because I have somebody who supports me in that. And it's not like that does the work for me. It's not like that gets me from here to there.
Yeah, you got to do that.
Yeah, but that level of support, that acknowledgement, and that help and that information along the way is so critical and crucial and encouraging that I can't thank you enough for. And that's the thing that I appreciate.
Thank yourself too for putting in the work, though.
Well, sure, but we're not getting into that.
Okay.
But something that I couldn't thank you enough for, and I couldn't possibly appreciate any more than I do, just because to me that's the most important thing that I wish more people provided, that you do. It just seems so effortless when you do it. It just seems so effortless, almost as if you were just born to do that.
Right. Well, that's because it is a discipline and a skill that I've honed every day of my life until here. So anytime someone's really good at something, probably didn't start that way.
But the fact that you put in that work for a skill that benefits other people is something that I don't think most people appreciate enough, and something that I'm not willing to fall into the same trap and not appreciate, because it is something that I appreciate so much about you as a person that I don't think I thank you for enough. But I do appreciate it immensely.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing the way you feel about that. And I'm glad and proud of you for all the growing that you've done and all the work that you've done. And I think you've worked really hard and you deserve it. And I think you'll keep working hard and keep growing. And I appreciate that in you.
Thank you. What are 3 attributes you value most in the people that you keep around you and close to you?
Number 1, an open mind. Absolutely. So important and critical for a healthy, meaningful, good life, to enjoy your life, to be able to get through life and find answers and not feel trapped and overwhelmed and helpless and victimized. Because if you don't have an open mind, then you're not perceiving life for what it is, and it'll constantly be punishing you for your incorrect perception. And then you have to keep doubling down on it and not accepting that. And it makes you miserable and it makes life hard. And that's really tough, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. An open mind is extremely important. And then I think on top of that, strong character, strong self-discipline. And that takes time to develop, but you have to have the self-discipline to accept reality for what it is. You can't just have an open mind and then be open to new information. You have to have the strength of character to set aside your personal motivations and your personal biases. You can take them into account. The way you feel is valid and the way you feel isn't wrong. And you shouldn't be wrong. You shouldn't feel wrong or bad or broken or not good or ashamed of the way you feel. But how you feel shouldn't determine your perception of the world. It shouldn't make your decisions and it shouldn't make your choices for you. Something you need to take account of. Now, it factors in and it's very important, but it's not the only thing. So I think it's extremely critical that people have the strength of character to exercise those things. For me, I think those are the only two things that I look in. I couldn't think of like a third would be, I could say something else like maturity or something like that. But if someone has those two traits and they're applying them, I think the rest will come. Just give it time. And I think it's really important because without character, you can't implement those things. And I think that you need to have an open mind. And that if you truly have an open mind, then you will have an open heart.
So number one, how do you think people see you and perceive you?
With their eyes, usually.
And number two, amongst how people see you, what is something that people always misunderstand about you?
Well, if people are consistently misunderstanding something about me, I have a tendency to think that maybe it's for a reason and I should work on that. Because maybe people are consistently interpreting my actions as being arrogant. Well, here's the thing. Maybe I'm not necessarily being arrogant, but if people are continuously interpreting my actions as being arrogant, then I'm, at the very least, I'm not communicating well enough that people in general are perceiving what I'm communicating correctly. So maybe I am being arrogant, and that's a real question I need to ask myself. Am I being arrogant? And if I'm truly not being arrogant, then how am I communicating in a way in which people perceive this way? Maybe I need to work on the way I communicate. So that would be one thing that in the past I've heard a lot, is a lot of people have told me, oh, you're arrogant. I think some of that is in the way I communicate, and that I need to work on communicating better and communicating in a way in which people don't perceive what I'm saying as arrogant. Because if they're thinking about what I'm saying in the terms of I'm arrogant, they're not truly thinking about what I'm saying to them. And I'm not saying something to somebody just to say words. I'm saying something to somebody for a constructive reason. And so I want them to hear the words that I'm saying, just like I want to be able to hear the words that they're saying.
And then how do people typically perceive you?
I think it varies. Some people tend to paint me as a little bit better than I am, or quite a bit better than I am. They tend to view me just by my most positive traits and not really acknowledge my faults. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's the people who don't like me and only acknowledge my faults. If I had to draw like a clear distinction of what the clearest way people see me as, I think the clearest way people tend to see me as is they tend to see me as very bold and aggressive. Because I am very bold and I'm willing to be aggressive when it's high on my priority list and it's important to me. Now, I think aggression is something that you have to be very careful with because it can very easily be misconstrued and it can very easily mislead you and hurt other people. So you have to be very careful with it. But I don't think aggression in and of itself is necessarily wrong. I think it's a tool like anything else, and that in moderation and the correct application, it's very useful and very powerful. I think that if I was going to outline the most common, what I would perceive as misconception and misunderstanding that people generally have about me that I've heard over the years, and I haven't heard this a ton, but I've definitely heard it more than others, is that whenever I do something whenever I'm just jump out there and do something, people have a tendency to tell me that I'm super arrogant and that I think that I'm always right and that I'll always succeed. I think that's because they just see me do things, like repeatedly do things in which I've failed at before, or maybe like isn't a guarantee or is a big risk, or like the possibility that I'll fail is really high. And they see me repeatedly do things like this and they think, wow, he just must be delusional and super arrogant and think he can do everything because he keeps doing these things. And even though he keeps failing, it doesn't bother him at all. And I could see how a lot of people would easily interpret that as arrogance. But for me, I think they're misunderstanding confidence and peace of mind as arrogance because I'm not afraid to fail. I know I'll fail. Most of the time I fail. Most everything I do constantly all the time is failure. But that's okay because failure is never a waste unless you wasted your opportunity to learn from it. And I'll learn from it. So I'm not afraid to fail because it's not a loss for me. It's a net gain. If I fail enough times and learn enough things, eventually I'll get to the point in which I'll get it right. And maybe getting it right doesn't mean that I do the thing that I set out to originally. Maybe it means that I learn and acknowledge the fact that that's not something I can do. Or maybe I find a creative solution to do that a different way. But being afraid to fail and being able to take a risk holds so many people back, and it's not going to hold me back. And I don't care if people think that I'm arrogant and think that I can do anything. I don't think that I can do anything. I'm just not afraid to fail, and I'm not afraid to lose because I won't really lose, and I won't really fail because I will never fail to learn, and I will never lose the opportunity to learn and grow from the experience that I had.
Are you a religious or a spiritual person?
No. I think a lot of religions have had constructive use in the past for a lot of people. And I think a lot of them have done a lot of destructive for a lot of people in the past. They're very much a mixed bag. But personally, I don't find and haven't found religion to be a reliable means by which to arrive at truth, because religion is by nature a mindset that passes itself off as having all the right answers and the perfect answers and is above questioning itself. And that proves very problematic for me because any system that's a good system should always want you to question it. Like I said, the truth has the most motivation, more motivation than anything else. Probably the only real true motivation for people to question it with an open mind, because that can only lead you closer to the truth and not further from it. Any philosophy that tells you not to ask questions, people that ask you not to ask questions, don't have your best interest at heart. I don't see any way, anything you can believe that you can't believe based on faith, and I don't see anything that you can believe based on faith that you can't trust based on good information legitimately, that there's a benefit for. Now, there might be an exception that I just haven't thought of, but I've never been presented with one, and I've asked many philosophers and theologians from many different religions for that. And then as far as spiritual in what sense? If you mean like being super melodramatic and pantheistic and like looking at the universe and being like, oh, I'm watching a leaf fall off of a tree and it's so beautiful and the experience is intoxicating and I'm loving every moment of it. Then in that sense, I guess if you consider that to be spiritual, then yes, I'm very spiritual. If you don't consider that to be spiritual, if you consider being spiritual believing in metaphysical things, then no. Like, I don't believe necessarily that metaphysical things don't exist. I just don't think we have sufficient evidence to prove that we do. And until we do, it's not meaningful for me.
What makes you feel uneasy, overwhelmed, or anxious?
Well, if something makes me uneasy, overwhelmed, or anxious, I have a tendency to evaluate, why does it make me feel that way? Should I be feeling uneasy, overwhelmed, or anxious? The question of, like, I see the little pie charts and the memes, and it summarizes it very well. It actually, articulated the idea much better than I could have before seeing it. But it was essentially the same terms I thought of, is it has a little graph, and it's like, are you worried about something, or are you upset about something? And then it has little arrows, and it says, can you do something about it? No, don't worry about it. Yes, do something about it. Don't worry about it. And that's kind of the way I see it, of things sometimes stress me and upset me. But it's a question of, can I do something about it? Do I have a high pressure audition coming up that I'm worried about? Why am I stressed? Did I feel like I didn't prepare enough? Do I feel like I don't have enough time to prepare? Maybe I only have a little bit of time to prepare. Well, then I accept the time that I have. Feeling upset and hurt about it, it's perfectly valid that I feel stressed about a high pressure audition, but continuing to stress about it once I make that realization and letting that control me and then waste the precious little time that I have to prepare isn't going to make it better. So I'm going to accept the fact that I have some time. I'm going to regulate my breathing. I'm going to breathe deeply. I'm going to clear my mind. I'm going to accept that thing, and I'm going to set it aside. I'm not going to try to push it away and not feel it. It's a thing that I feel, and it's real, and it's there, and it can stay there. But then I'm going to move forward accordingly and prepare in the time that I have, and the performance that I give is the performance that I give. And if I don't get that role, that's fine. It was an opportunity to practicing under pressure. It was an opportunity to practice making decisions under pressure. It was an opportunity to practice managing myself. Failure isn't a waste. Failure is an opportunity to practice so you can get better.
One more. So the last question is, when have you felt the most failure and when have you felt the most success?
I don't know. There was instances in my past when I was younger where I viewed things as like failure and negative, and I was upset and hurt by them. I invested a lot of years into a person's life who took advantage of me and wasted my time, and it was a toxic relationship. I've made a lot of costly mistakes that have hurt other people, and I hold myself responsible for that, and I'm ashamed of those actions. But you have to let go of those. Like, I think back on them now, and I don't really have negative feelings about it. Like, not anymore. Maybe I did at the time. If I think back on something and I have negative feelings about something, I think, whoa, why do I have negative feelings? I need to address these feelings. I need to grow from this. I need to unpack how I feel and why I feel this way. Figure out if these are feelings that I need to keep around. Like, obviously the way I feel is valid, but the way I feel shouldn't determine my actions and it shouldn't determine my outcome. What do I need to evaluate about this kind of situation in the future, or just learning from this circumstance? Why am I bitter about it? I shouldn't be bitter about something. Like, I don't want that negative emotion riding me and controlling me and ruining my experience and my happiness. I don't need unpacked bags piling up on my back. I don't need to carry these burdens with me. So I'm going to address this. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to wrap this up. Now, if you just want me to list a specific time that I did something that was shameful or ridiculous or stupid, I can do that. I can tell you lots of stupid decisions.
No, I think that answers that. I think okay. I'm fine with that answer.
Okay. Maybe they were excited to hear about some stupid shit that I did, though. We could tell stories afterward. Maybe we could talk about some of the dumb shit that I've done and some of the stupid decisions that I've made. There's a lot of them. The most success. I don't know. This is probably one of the ways in which I struggle and that I need to grow, is that I tend to take no time at all, really, to take inventory of how far I've grown for anything other than the fact to take analytical inventory of, okay, this is how far I've gone. This is how much progress I've made. This is not really in terms of like sitting down and just being like, wow, I've grown and matured a lot as a person. And you know, I'm proud of myself for that. I think positive ego can be a problem because positive ego can unfairly and disproportionately give you unfair confidence and a skewed perception of yourself in reality, which can cause problems in situations in your interactions with other people and your decisions. And I think negative ego does the same. I don't think people should have negative or positive ego. I think you should have an accurate inventory and understanding of who you are, but that's extremely hard to do. And some people take a lifetime to do that, and some people never get there. That's okay. We all work on things in our own time. It's your responsibility to work on yourself and my responsibility to work on me. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't really worry about having negative ego and positive ego, because I think negative ego holds me down and positive ego proposes problems. So I just want to have a fair acceptance. I just want to accept myself for who I am. But I think I sometimes take that a little bit too far and then fail to recognize the fact that it's okay to also feel proud of my accomplishments. There's nothing wrong with being proud of the hard work that you've done in your accomplishments. I guess if I was going to pick something that I'm super proud of for accomplishing, it would be the fact that I've come this far. It would be the fact that I've worked so hard and that I continue to work hard. And it would also be the fact that I made a conscious effort to discipline myself and start down this road of understanding and knowledge and in search of truth at such a young age. I started so young, and most of my young life, I kept it to myself. But I had so much to work on and I didn't really have any answers to share with anyone. So why would I be preaching or philosophizing or sharing my perception? Because I didn't have value to add yet. I was just absorbing value from everywhere. But I definitely say that I'm very grateful that I've come this far, and I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad that I put in this work, and I'd like to continue to do so. Despite all the crazy, stupid mistakes that I make and continue to make, and all the failures that I have and continue to have, I'm grateful for those too. They're part of the trip.
Thank you very much for joining us. This has been the Struggle for Meaning podcast. Thank you, Paige, for those quality questions. Always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for all you do for the show. If you have any more questions we didn't answer here, you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at the Struggle for Meaning podcast, or on our website, lingeringshadows.com. As always, See you next week, and take care. Thank you for joining me. This has been The Struggle for Meaning with Russell Eugene Welch III as your host. That's me. If you have enjoyed this program, please share it with someone else and leave a 5-star review to help us grow. If you go to lingeringshadow.com, you can find my blog, social media, updates on all my current projects, and announcements for future ones. I post all kinds of stuff on there every day. We always have an ongoing conversation about personal growth and finding meaning there. So hop on over and let's hear your thoughts too. Again, that's lingeringshadow.com. Keep learning, keep growing, and take it all one day at a time. You got this. Remember, you are not alone. We all live life together, so let's share life together. Now, here is a moment for yourself to just breathe and feel alive. Take care.